In this video, we're going to be talking about how to get past financial trauma, whether that be the loss of a job, loss of a business, or the big one, divorce. Coming up next. So we're going to be talking about what financial trauma is, how it affects you, and 5 tips that help you move forward. Now, for those who have lived more than a decade or two, we have all experienced various financial ups and downs. But what separates just a normal financial downfall from true trauma is really twofold. First, that financial trauma is devastating in the effect that it totally changes the way we think about our future. This is why things like divorce are so traumatic, because what you expected to happen didn't happen and isn't going to happen. And so you've got to completely rethink what you thought your future was going to be. The second difference is that trauma lasts for weeks, months, sometimes even years. Getting past it and letting go of the emotions associated with that traumatic experience can be very, very difficult. If you've ever lost a business, you understand this. I mean, it's happened to me. Letting go of those feelings of failure and worthlessness and being able to move forward in some kind of positive way takes time. It's like it's a grieving process you have to go through. The same is true with divorce or loss of a loved one. You have to go through the grieving process, but you also have to deal with the financial trauma that goes along with that process. Now, one of the big things that many people have gone through, especially since the 2008 recession, was bankruptcy. A lot of those people are just now coming out of those bankruptcy situations, and it feels like here you are in your 40s, 50s, or older, and you're starting all over. That's very, very traumatic. On top of that, the incidence of people over 60 divorcing has doubled since 1990. It's called gray divorce. Of course, people have to have a name for it. But people are living longer. And so they are realizing, okay, I am unhappy. We have different ideas of what the future is, and we're going to get a divorce. Well, if you do that over 60, your finances take a huge hit. Talk about being devastated. And really the idea of what you thought your retirement was going to be has to completely be changed. And you have to rethink it. And that takes time. One of the biggest reasons it's so traumatic is that loss of control. I mean, we really think that we have complete control over our finances. And in many ways we do. But we don't have control over other people. We don't have control of the broader economy. There are certain things beyond our control, but even if they are beyond our control, we have to deal with them on a financial level. You can't constantly blame the economy or your ex-spouse or the person who took advantage of you in that lawsuit. You've got to be able at some point to let it go. But that is not an easy process, and I'm not trying to suggest that it is. It is traumatic, but only by facing it can you actually make any kind of progress. Now, when you have this type of prolonged stress in your life, especially financial stress, it can cause tremendous anxiety. And that anxiety manifests itself in a number of ways. You can develop insomnia, restlessness, you get jittery, you get hyper-vigilant around money, almost to the point of being, Scrooge McDuck. You just can't spend a dime on anything. You become ill. It affects your health because it's ongoing and long-term. So it manifests itself very prominently in your life. When you lock your mind into this state of fear, what happens is you tend to withdraw. So instead of improving your finances or your overall life, you ignore things. You let them go. You ignore the debt collectors. You don't create a plan. What happens is it worsens. And so we're going to talk about 5 ways you can break free from that traumatic mental state of paralyzation and actually make some forward progress and start to feel better about your life. The very first step is don't be so hard on yourself. It's really easy to beat yourself up over coulda, shoulda, woulda, if only this, if only that. And you've got to give yourself a little bit of grace here. While guilt and shame are real, especially if you have created a financial mess, which so many of us have at various periods in our lives, that guilt and that shame really doesn't help you move forward. And you've got to be able to set it aside and do some positive things that impact your finances. You know, it's really important to realize that debt is not some sort of lack of character or some sort of failing in your character. Debt is just a numbers game. But getting past that debt and being able to pay it down and move forward, that is a mental game. And you've got to get in control of your mental game. While your finances feel completely out of control, your mental game is completely within your control. It's both a behavioral issue and a math issue. And in order to deal with the math issue, you've got to deal with the behavioral issue. So that's number one. Give yourself some grace and stop beating yourself up. Number two, you have got to take personal responsibility. This means not avoiding your finances anymore. Get everything you owe out on paper. Let's take a look at it. Let's look and see exactly how bad it is. You've got to know how bad it is in order to correct it. It's also important to realize no one's going to ride in on their white horse and save you. You've got to save yourself. And blaming someone else for the situation, even if it truly is their fault, it doesn't matter at this point. The only way you are going to fix it is to tell yourself, this is my mess to fix. And in order to fix it, I'm going to take personal responsibility and say, I'm in control and I'm going to fix it. The longer you continue to blame, the more you put off taking that control and taking that responsibility. As hard as it is, you have to set aside those negative emotions and deal with reality. So number 3 is to create a budget based on today's reality. You don't create a budget based on what you wish it were. And that's really easy to do because you really, a lot of times, haven't quite gotten past the things that don't exist anymore. The retirement account you don't have anymore, or that has gone way down because of a financial trauma. The plans you had of what was going to happen and you're going to have to change those. Now's the time to sit down and develop a budget based on today's income, today's expenses, and figuring out where you want to go. Not where you wanted to go 5 years ago, but where you're wanting to go now. You've got to think through that. Now this means dealing with both sides of the equation. You can't lower your expenses enough to be a millionaire. That's not going to happen. You've got to lower your expenses and figure out how to do that in a real way. And then you've also got to look at the other side of the equation. How do you increase your income? Do you try to get a promotion at work? Do you get a different job that pays more? Do you get a side gig? You have got to face the reality that all the money and assets you thought you had and that you've spent your whole life building maybe now are either gone or cut significantly. And you've got to start rebuilding them. Once you start to rebuild, you will once again be in control of that future. So the sooner you start, the more you'll have later. Number 4 is identify the issues that created that situation and work on those every day. Was it a relationship issue? One of the worst things people do the minute they get out of a long-term relationship is jump right back into an ill-advised relationship, a rebound relationship. You want to really protect your emotional well-being and not do that. You want to wait and make some decisions for yourself. Get back in control of your life. Rebuild your life before you even think about sharing it with another person. That can be really devastating to have financial devastation on top of relationship devastation. It can just be a really unholy mess. So you really want to give yourself some time to grieve, give yourself some time to make some decisions, set some goals, start working toward them before you are in a healthy position emotionally to maybe once again consider that. If part of the behavior that caused your last financial issue, let's say you're just terrible with money, that is something you can work on every day. You know, take a Dave Ramsey course or take another financial course that teaches you. We're not born knowing how to handle money. And at some point, usually very early on, but sometimes a lot later on, we've screwed it up. We're not perfect. So if there are things you don't know, or things you don't understand, or things you don't do well, take a course, take a class, teach yourself those things so you can improve, and next time you won't have such financial devastation. You'll be prepared. But take the responsibility to improve yourself and improve your understanding of money and how to create more money, save more money, and be able to move forward. Number 5 is talk to people. Talk to people about what's going on. And I know this is hard. That shame and that guilt that comes with a bankruptcy, a divorce. You don't want to talk to people about how, you can't figure out how to make ends meet. Finances are hard to talk about. And so when I say talk to people, that can be really difficult to do at first. But it's interesting that once you start talking about all the ways you've screwed up money, you would be amazed at all the seemingly successful people who will jump in and say, oh, I did this once. Oh, I did this once. And the thing is, once you start talking to people about the best way to recover from a financial trauma, they will give you all sorts of help, all sorts of advice. They're amazingly supportive. Going through hard times and financial hard times is something everyone deals with independently. We're basically taught our whole lives not to talk about money and that it's somehow rude or somehow, but it's not. It is a wonderful way to connect to people and get some help, get some support. Even if they can't help you, they'll support you. Because here again, we have all experienced some kind of financial setback on occasion. And so we can all relate to that on some level. You'd be surprised. It's amazing the number of people that I have worked with that are millionaires. At one in particular that I'm thinking of, he was living in his dad's basement after a divorce, 50 years old. And his shoes were in such bad shape, they had holes in the bottom. He had cardboard in the bottom of his shoes because he couldn't afford to get them resold or buy new ones. And 10 years later, he was a millionaire. But only because he decided to take control of his life and work toward those things that would create the kind of financial security and financial future that he had longed for his whole life. But you have to make that decision. You have to decide that's what you really want. If you just continue to sit and binge watch Netflix, you're going to have an even bigger problem next month. You've got to accept the personal responsibility and then take the steps to move forward. Taking control of even the littlest thing in your financial life feels good. It encourages you, it's you encouraging you to take the next step. There are great resources in every community that you can access that will help you create a better financial future for yourself. These include things like libraries. They have tax help, legal help, financial help. They offer classes a lot of times, depending on where you are. Oftentimes, all of these services are free. Same is true of senior centers. You don't necessarily have to be a senior to access them. If you're over 50, over 55, they will occasionally have, tax help, legal help, financial help. They will talk a lot about the services available that you can access well before you're 65. And certain states have a lot of things that you can access. So it's really worth your while to start learning all the different access points in your community for information, for skill sets, for teaching yourself what you need to know, for getting help with those things you have no idea about. If you are already retired, the Department of Human Services in your area can also help you. It can help you understand what government programs are available, how to get your housing paid for, your utilities paid for, what things are offered free by your state for people who are retired. Can you get free tags for your car? Some states offer those. And it's worthwhile to go and investigate those and think, how many of these things can you access and get yourself to a point where your finances have improved dramatically. And all of the things I have suggested are just a start, but don't wait. Start today, take control of your finances, and get past the financial traumas in your life. See you next time.